Once upon a time, there was a kid named Andy who loved sailing. Andy read and reread a book about a guy who sailed all the way around the world. He thought, how amazing would that be? Andy grew up to have a great life with some amazing children he wanted to be an example for, and he built a fulfilling career serving others, coaching Olympians and some of the greatest athletes in the world, coaching college students and young entrepreneurs and business people and teachers and fellow coaches. Over the more than 3 decades of Coach Andrew's career, he's had an incredibly positive impact on thousands of lives, all while helping people achieve their dreams. Now, Andrew is embarking on a dream of his own, sailing around the world in the Clipper Round the World race. 42,000 miles, 11 months sailing the globe, sailing into port on 6 of the world's 7 continents. It's the adventure of a lifetime, young Andy's dream manifested by Andrew's ongoing belief and positive mindset. Where in the world is Andrew Moss? Let's find out. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Kay. Great to see you.
It's great to see you too. Where in the world are you?
Well, I am sitting in the study, if I properly describe the room I'm in, of my eldest cousin, who lives about an hour north of Cape Town in South Africa.
Wow.
Is exactly where I am right now.
That's exactly where you are. It's interesting because, like, obviously the rooms are going to be different, like wherever we are seeing you, for folks recording, and like there's this really like this velvety looking chair that you're sitting in, like because you got up and moved around a little bit before, and I was like, ooh, this is so. Because we had talked last time about how Cape Town was special for you.
Very, very much so. Yeah, I've really felt it actually. It's special because, well, it's special because my father's from South Africa. He learned to sail here, grew up, went to university, all of that here. We've come here before to visit our relatives, but it was like, I think we figured out it was probably about 40 years ago was the last time we were here.
Wow.
And so, yeah, the idea of coming back, my uncle and my father, thankfully, are both still alive. They're both in their late 80s. So to come here in a sailboat, having been taught how to sail by my father, was just sort of like almost such an amazing idea in itself. I really didn't know what to make of it. I just knew that it would be really special. And as it's played out, we had a challenging trip across, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But in the last few days, I had an opportunity to really help our boat get to a better place, get all the crew feeling better. And then, my skipper gave me the opportunity to take our boat in the last 4 hours across the finish line and right into Cape Town. And so, and then I've had a chance to now, after a few days of getting the boat cleaned up and fixed up, I was picked up by my uncle and my eldest cousin and brought up to their home north of Cape Town into these very beautiful surroundings that I'm in right now. And yeah, it feels just kind of hard to describe. Like, we went mountain biking this morning and stopped by a nice little pair of zebras who were just hanging out, and I thought to myself, like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
and it's very special. Yeah, we spent a lot of time together, and it's been a really special experience.
That is awesome. The sort of, like, when you talk about an hour north of Cape Town, that's like there's this big mountain that you could see from, like, there are pictures from the boat that you can see this big mountain. I think it's called Table or Tabletop Mountain. Is that?
Yes.
I'm not like, I don't know what. what direction it's in, but I feel like pretty much everything is north of Cape Town, right?
Yes. Well, Cape Town is on the it's not quite on the southern tip of Africa, but it's sort of on the just tucked around to the east of the southern tip. The actual Cape of Good Hope is a little bit further south and a little bit further east. But yeah, I mean, you basically have to go around Table Mountain to get and the adjacent mountains that to get out of the Cape Town area. So I think we're up along the western shore from Cape Town about an hour. And this is sort of known. This is an area known for its wines, and so it's a sort of a more arid, but still mountainous area. I can see a mountain range right in front of me. That's, and we went today and looked around at some of the different vineyards and it's a very sort of agriculture focused area with wine being seemingly one of their popular crops. Yes.
Cool. That can't be bad.
No, it wasn't bad. I had a nap this afternoon, as you know, because by the time I woke up from it, we was a few minutes late for our recording. But I think that's an accumulation of 3 weeks of sailing and maybe one extra wine tasting this morning. So
yeah. One extra wine. So like this is real R&R for you right now. Like,
yeah, the 2 days here are about all I get. It was full on from. We were the whole fleet took a little longer than expected to get across from Uruguay. And then so our timelines to get the boats prepped were compressed a little bit. But once we got the boat ready, everybody's sort of had a couple of days to step away from the boat and then come back on Friday, and Saturday we leave. So it's not much space.
So I do want, obviously we're going to talk about this leg that just went past. But what's coming up in me right now is I think is Cape Town. Am I associating Archbishop Desmond Tutu with Cape Town? Is that correct?
Well, Tutu for sure is from this area, but also, I mean, the prison where Nelson Mandela was held is just off the shore of Cape Town in a place called Robben Island, and it's a very moving experience to go and see that and the history of his history and the impact that he's had on this country, and to imagine him being jailed there for as long as he was and then coming back as the president is remarkable. And it's still a complicated part of this country, and the racial inequalities and how you move away from that to something that resembles a democracy. It's complicated, but it's happening. And you see it happening, and then you still see that there's lots of room for it to go still. And so yeah, I mean, Cape Town's a special place for all kinds of reasons, but it's certainly as a maritime city, for any of the trading that was done between Europe and India and China over the years, that it used to be a major thoroughfare of ships going around the Cape of Good Hope. But it's also got a very interesting history of its own with respect to South Africa.
Yeah. Well, I think in the last maybe a couple of months, there's a documentary that I've watched like 3 times because there's almost no media that I consume anymore, like basically at all. And this is something that really caught my attention. It's called I Am. It's have you heard of it?
I've seen it. Yeah.
You've seen it?
With the Desmond Tutu and
Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn and
I'm not sure if it's the same one, but there's also one, and it's something about happiness, which is Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, this is a little bit different. And there is footage of Nelson Mandela
Mm,
in it as well as he is leaving that prison.
mhm,
But like, because it's interesting, because it's coming up for me in what you shared, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, about what this journey has been to get to Cape Town for you.
mm,
And at the end of this movie, I Am, which is made by the director of the Bruce Almighty
mhm,
movies. He had a real health challenge himself, and then as he was coming out of that, he started being really curious what some of the foremost thinkers, you know, would say in response to these two questions. The first one is, what is wrong in our world? And the second one is, how can we fix it?
mhm,
And he interviews Desmond Tutu extensively. And at the end of it, basically Desmond Tutu gets the last word. And what he
mm,
says is, and it's interesting because I'm not a particularly religious person, but really spiritually, this really spoke to me. And Archbishop Tutu says something like, God says, I only have you. You're it.
mhm,
And any small step that you take is the right step. Like it has
mm,
to do with sort of an open heart and compassion and feeling like we're not so small. Like
mhm,
the little things that we do every day really, really, really make a difference. And
mhm, mhm.
um yeah, I've been I maybe you can help me understand why that's coming up in connection with this leg for you. And we don't even have to do that, but I would really love to hear what this leg was for you. I think listeners and viewers want to hear too.
Mm. Well, I'd love to just stay for a moment on that whole comment, and
Mm,
you know, Archbishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela had something very much in common, which was it's part of the African culture, really, which is a um, a belief in forgiveness of
mm,
people, a belief in the good in people,
mm,
and for those that were around and studied or paid attention during the transition of South Africa from apartheid to where they're going now, one of the most important factors was how Mandela came out of prison and how he approached those who had oppressed him and the African people for so long. And they were one of the first countries to have a truth and reconciliation um, process, which was public. So they had public
mm,
hearings to basically allow those who had been the oppressors to admit what they had done without generally without repercussion.
mm,
And I think just yeah, just finding that within ourselves
mm,
is a lot of what Tutu speaks to.
mm.
And there is another documentary with Tutu and Dalai Lama together, which is hilarious because the two of them are both so funny and so well spoken. And they talk about happiness, and they talk about sort of the state of the world from a happiness perspective. And for a lot of it to me, it's really about, I don't want to say, well, I'll say it this way. I think you and I have talked about many times, people spend way too much time in other people's business.
Mhm,
And if you can find a way to make your business uh, being happy as a starting point,
mm.
and being curious about other people, to borrow the line from what's his name, the soccer coach show.
Oh, is it Ted Lasso?
Yeah, it's Ted
Yes.
Lasso who says, be curious, not judgmental.
Mm,
I think it's a famous poet's line, but Walt Whitman line. But that really is, I think, what's available to everybody, is
mm,
that idea that you choose how you're going to start every day. When you roll out of bed and your consciousness has had a nice little rest and you open your eyes, like what you decide to make of that day doesn't have to be change the world. But if
mm,
you start it from a place of happiness and even happiness might be too broad a term. It might be just contentment or appreciation for being on the planet and having the opportunity you have. And then go from there in a way that basically maintains that throughout your day. You don't, and being curious why others might not quite be there yet, and why their behavior might not serve you well. Like, to me, that is the fastest way that we get the planet operating in a more harmonious way, is that we all recognize that we have that choice, and have some of the humility and the care for other human beings that is demonstrated by people like Tutu and people like Nelson Mandela, despite having been oppressed for decades and decades of their lives, right? And so I don't know exactly what he was referring to, but I know what's part of my life, and part of definitely how I've approached the sailing race is, every time I wake up, which is 3 or 4 times a day in the sailboat from our limited sleep pattern, it's a choice. How am I going to approach this next shift? And sometimes that next shift is extremely challenging. Other times, it's a blue sky, sunny day to head up on deck and enjoy a nice sail. But in both cases, it's up to me how I'm going to approach that and feel about it.
And that's exactly the intersection here, because you write about lying in your bunk, wondering how you're going to be is it the team lead? Is that, that's basically the first mate role?
Yeah.
And sort of describing that you like, there was a lot of promise in this leg, and there was, it didn't turn out quite that way, and quite the way with the promise sort of a thing. And you describe these real feelings of like frustration and although that sort of thing. And then you, at some point, you basically say, like, I have a choice about how I like you. Oh my God. So you talk about it. Am I going to do this for the next 8.5 months? What I've been doing for these last 2.5 months. And like, there's so much about this that was so striking, because it felt like this is really where, like, the things that you've been cultivating in your life, this is where they really start to pay off.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we talked about this in our last conversation when I got to Uruguay, was, this trip gives you an opportunity to use the skills that you've developed in a broader and broader circle of challenging situations. Yeah. I can definitely see now that I have been living life before the sailing trip having set up my life in a way that controls the intensity of challenge that I'm faced with. That I have a choice to be around the kinds of people I like to be around. I have a choice to live in a way that doesn't put a lot of hardship in front of me every day. I have a choice of what I eat. I have a choice of when I sleep. Like, I have a lot of personal choice. Now, on the sailing boat, that circle of comfort has been shrunk incredibly small. And a lot of things are more challenging. And being around, 19 other people for 3 weeks in some harsh conditions, it brings out different aspects of people's personality, which also then forces me to have to respond to those in a certain way. And then having this title appointed, assigned to me, where I'm to lead these people, it's been really interesting, because I've led teams for all of my coaching career, but those teams all sort of had a common purpose and a motivation to be there. And what's different about this is that people that are doing this around the world race, whether they're doing one leg or all of them, they have a variety of different reasons for being here. And you cannot just approach everybody in the same way.
Mm.
And you only have a few weeks to get to know people. So, that those comments I made about lying in my bunk, there were many nights when the wind and the conditions out up above were just really, really, really difficult. And I needed to figure out of the 9 people on my watch, who was ready and capable to do different roles on the next watch, to get us through the 4 hours or 6 hours, safely and competently. And we're in a race, so we're still trying to go as fast as we can. And and people respond to those situations differently than you might have anticipated. And so I have to be able to adapt to that. So it's been one of the more interesting parts of it for me, but it certainly brought with it some anxiety or some feelings that in my normal day-to-day life, I've sort of crafted a way to not have too much of that around. Yeah. And then at the same time, it's been really cool to see people get through those, and to see our boat get through those times and really come out of the other side much, much better and much more positive. So, yeah, there's a lot of layers of psychology going on, because of the conditions and because of this, the makeup of our team. But it's been an interesting challenge. It's been sort of I think the intensity of that, and just sort of the human dynamic. Obviously, I knew that going in, that was going to be part of it, but I think how it's played out has been one of the more surprising components of the race so far for me.
It's interesting because I hear what you're saying, and what's coming up for me is the movie Parenthood, where there's this young couple, and the new husband goes racing, and he gets into like a tremendous accident, and his new wife is like, I can't, this is too intense, I can't even go near it. And her mom says, this is marriage, Judy, now let's get in the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really well done in the sense of like, this is a hard moment of coaching, but this is it's time now to assume this responsibility. And yeah. I'm curious if there's an example that you feel like you could share, because I feel like I'd really love to kind of, I don't know, understand a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. I'm thinking of a lady on our watch who's a retired physician, so probably in her early 60s, and has some sailing background. And she was very, very good on the crew, and was able to do a lot of things. Had her on the helm, steering the boat in a lot of different situations. We were on the helm together, and that I was sort of mentoring her one session, and we had quite a big wind come through, and crazy sea state. And she did a really great job, and actually I think had the fastest speed of any of that the boat has gone so far in the race while she was steering. And then like a couple of days later, she was back steering again, and made a mistake in a situation that led to us getting one of our sails wrapped around one of the forestays, and we had to drop the sail, and the sail got ripped a little bit, so we had to repair it. And she got really sort of flustered by that. And so, after that, it was a question of, well, I know she's capable, and I've seen her under very, very tough situations. She's now withdrawn and is feeling a little bit less confident in herself, a little less sure that she wants to be back there. But the reality is, I need people who can steer the boat to be able to do the shifts that we do. to fill the role. And so how do I get, and when is she going to be ready to come back and to try again?
Mm.
And so, being able to figure that out through communicating with her, by giving her chances to do it in less stressful situations and then build back up. And she ended up within a matter of a few days being ready to try again, and then was able to go on and be very successful steering again. And so that's a very specific example, but it's played out across a number of people on the boat. And some people responded in a way where they were ready to try again, and other people really have withdrawn and have been less willing to do so. And they're all equally, or they all have the right to decide how they want to experience this race. And so I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. I do have to create the conditions, though, that we have enough people to get through the race safely, and that people are given a chance to learn and grow from their mistakes, or the whole learning process in their own way. And so juggling all of that while trying to get enough sleep and trying to take care of myself and trying to make sure the boat is going fast, that's it's that times 8 or 10 people every day trying to figure out how the human element is going to work.
No, I mean that. No wonder you were like, do I want to do this for 8.5 more months?
Yeah, I mean that question was certainly not relative to if it was just about me and I could just have my own experience on the boat, that question would never have come up. It's really, do I like? And I actually talked to my skipper about, is having this role on the boat going to take away in any way from my experience? Certainly it will be a different experience than the one I had anticipated. I think I had anticipated a much more individual experience of being a reliable person who can, do whatever needs to be done on the boat well, and to be called on in any situation, and to choose, a mind state to do that and enjoy it. That would be a much different experience than the one I'm having now, which has shifted more towards trying to actually help other people have an experience that they're really happy about. So it's different, it's different, and it certainly has created a different level of stress, or a different level of anxiousness on me than I had anticipated.
I mean, I'm remembering our very first conversation, right, where I asked you, what does self-care mean when you're doing this role? And I think well, I do have a curiosity about that,
And what is it now? Well, self-care, I mean, fundamentally, it's actually having the capacity to make those decisions and to work through what I've just spoken about, in a state that I'm somewhat rested and somewhat clear-minded. And that's not easy on the boat. It's a very physical experience. So when you add the physical experience plus the mental experience that we've spoken about, you really have to make sure you're taking care of your own well-being, mindset, and so that you can make good decisions and help people have a positive experience, and help the boat go as fast as possible. So I don't know that my answer has changed on what it is, but it definitely is. It's harder to maintain that level of self-care than it would be if it was just about just taking care of myself.
Right, because you were running away to go spend a year on a boat.
Yeah, I'm not trying to use the word running away, but
well, no, yeah, but
I thought this was going to be just Andrew's great adventure, and yeah, there would be other people involved in it. There would be other people on the boat who would be having their own adventure. Yeah, I did not anticipate I was getting into, Andrew's year-long adventure leading a group of strangers around the world. That's a very different experience to sign up for. And there is the option as we go around that I don't have to continue to do the role for every leg. Mike, our skipper, appreciates the fact that I bring a very calm and sort of nurturing way about the role, and am able to deal with some of the more challenging personalities quite easily. So for the well-being of the boat, it definitely is, helpful to have somebody with some of the skills that I bring to do that. And I'm one of the better sailors on the boat, which sets an example and can, I have the credibility to teach other people and to show other people how we can sail well. But yeah, I mean, if there comes a point where I'm like, you know what, this is not at all what I want the experience to be about, I could very easily, step back from that role and just continue as an individual and contribute in that way.
Cool. I do want to come back to the words running away. Like I was using that to describe my 3-week trek across England, because it had that sense of like in a good way. But I completely understand if it doesn't have the same connotations for you. And this big adventure that you're on is, I mean, I guess like, well, I think what's coming up in me is before this leg, we heard a lot. Like last time we had a 5-minute giggle about Assassin, the game Assassin. And like, it seems like it's taken on a very serious, a more serious, feeling, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I think if I were reading my commentary about the race, now I haven't read what Mike wrote in any of the blogs or anything else that came out of the boat. My commentary on this past race probably came across that way, more difficult, more challenging. But I would actually say that within the boat, it hasn't changed that much. We did not have the results, the outcome that we had hoped for, but we sailed very well, and we still had a lot of fun. And in the end, we realized that a couple of decisions that we made and how we executed those decisions ended up being the difference between being in the top 3 or 4 boats and being in the bottom 3 or 4 boats. But it wasn't like there was anything drastically wrong that had happened. There was no infighting. There was nothing that happened that we really left the leg concerned about as a group. And in fact, the group, as soon as we got here, the group went right into its normal social and cohesive way, and was able to move past the results and get ready for the next one very quickly. So I think being under having the layer of not getting the outcome that we wanted is what's new, because in the first few races we had very positive outcomes and the results, and so there wasn't that pressure added to all of the other human stuff. This one had, why are we in 10th place, and how do we get out of 10th place, and how do we claw back from that, and how do we do it in a way that doesn't break our culture, doesn't go against all the things that we've really built up as a team.
Yeah.
And I would say in a lot of ways we did that in the last few days of the race, in a way that should set us up for the ability to rebound and be very competitive once again.
And like we were hearing, like we heard a little bit about the rip sail. We heard that I think it was Skipper Mike had to climb up to the top of the mast. And
Lottie, Lottie actually.
It was Lottie who did
the assistant. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Halloween had to be canceled, and like a lot of stuff had to be rescheduled because of crazy weather. And then there were like these wind holes where you just sit going like a mile an hour
Mhm.
for days, and like it was just, it did not have the what we were hearing about did not have the same sense of fun
Mhm.
that it had. And I do, there was one, you have a crewmate named Ray, I think his name is Ray,
Yep.
who wrote a really wonderful journal entry that we were given, and it was actually about, which it relates to a question from somebody in the Facebook group. It was about cleaning the heads
Mm.
and about how, like, as a crew, you are supportive of each other in these really wonderful ways. Like, it goes so far beyond cleaning the heads.
Mhm.
And that felt, the feeling I got from that was like, we have been through a lot and we're okay. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was just, it was like the whole atmosphere of it was very, very different.
Yeah. I think that we, well, a few things. The first two races, we had pretty ideal conditions for most of it.
Mm,
Like the trip from Spain to Uruguay, other than the last 2 days where we had a good solid storm come through. Up until that, it was, I mean, people would have paid to go on this as a cruise. It was beautiful blue skies, lots of nature around. It was
mm,
very enjoyable. And then we have, dealt with a storm, got through it, and then we were in Uruguay. And
yeah.
so you didn't really have the as much of the challenge of the weather and the conditions as you would typically expect to have crossing from Spain to Uruguay. And I think that it might have lulled us into thinking that was sort of normal.
Mm,
And the reality is that the trip from Uruguay to South Africa normally is actually quite a windy leg. It's usually a series of storms that move from South America across to South Africa. And you just sort of, as a boat, you sort of attach yourself to a storm and ride it as far as you can, and then hop into the
mm,
next storm, and you're there in no time. I mean, I think they've had boats do this leg in 14 days before, and it took us
wow.
20.
Wow. Yeah.
So, there was that element where the conditions and the variety of conditions that we were faced with were much more difficult to deal with than we had faced so far.
Mm,
Um, and the wind holes, were extraordinarily frustrating because they sort of, you could see there was an area of light wind on the weather forecast and the system that we use to navigate. But when you actually got there, it was always different than what the forecast had been. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you would end up sailing into it. And then it was because the forecast wasn't clear, you really didn't know how to get out of it because you
mm,
weren't sure what part of it you were actually in.
mm.
Because all we're really dealing with is a 3-day forecast and then what we can see around us. So
Yeah.
um, the 3-day forecast ended up not really being that helpful most of the time. And so we needed to respond with what was going on around us. And, we unfortunately ended up in a part of the wind hole, which accordingly, everybody that was watching from outside the race could see far more than we could see actually sitting in the boat
Mm,
about, where we were in that and probably how to get out of it.
mm,
So that was frustrating because we were in, I think, fourth position or fifth position, for most of that. And then all of a sudden, as we were sitting there, other boats which had gone further north or further south were able to skirt around that.
mm.
Because that's one of the things that you do see is every 6 hours, you can see how other boats are performing.
Oh.
So if you see a boat that's ahead of you in a position and they're not going anywhere, then you would make adjustments to
You know
sail
to stay away
around that.
from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so that was frustrating because we gave up, I think, 4 or 5 positions as a result of ending up in that spot,
Yeah.
and then had to find a way to claw back from that. So Yeah, I think it was more challenging from a weather and a racing perspective. Not, but I think as a team we stayed together and really were strong as well as we had in the previous legs. It was just the combination of the conditions and the results were not what we had hoped for, and so you're probably getting a sentiment like that through the posts. And it's interesting because we had a flu bug go through the boat in the first few days.
Oh no.
So I was down for about 24 hours. Ray, who you spoke about, was in his bunk for 2 or 3 days,
Oh
not
my
feeling well.
God.
I think he had a combination of the bug plus some seasickness, and it went through a lot of people. And so yeah, there's just a lot going on, and it's easy to dismiss it all when you're flying along in first or second or third place. But when you're struggling at the back, it seemed to take a little more of a toll, and I'm sure that energy came through in the way
Yeah.
we've described it. Yeah.
Well, and it's real. So a couple things come up. First of all, your partner Monique showed me or indicated to me the wind. Like you could see the wind, that what the wind was doing, and as part of the race viewer, there's like this little wind icon that you can click on.
Yeah.
And like I know nothing about. I did sail once, but I know nothing about like the kind of conditions that you're in. So like I would just see these massive storms, like these huge swirling. I was like, oh my God, like what are they this is insane. Yeah. So I mean, the whole time across, I had so much admiration for like, you're out there, you're doing this. This is absolutely incredible. And like that, I think what I'm hearing is I mean, I think it's really inspiring because you didn't like stop or beat yourself up or you were talking before about helping people kind of come to a good place where you get off this boat and you're happy together, and that's all cool. It's making me think of Djokovic, the tennis player, who my dad has described him as like it's not just one game, it's not just one set, it's not just one championship, right? It's one point. He will forget what happened last point, this point. And that's like to be able to let go of all of those, whether they're really high positive feelings that might change your expectations, or whether they're really low unhappy feelings that might sort of cloud your experience. Like it seems like what you're describing is that you have experienced all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you and I talked before about the tennis analogy of sometimes you have to run to the corner of the court to hit a shot back, and if you stay there and admire it or bemoan the fact that you didn't hit it where you wanted to, you're going to miss the next shot because you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And being in the wrong place on the boat can have a danger to it if you are allowing yourself to get caught up in a situation and stay and continue to focus on that situation and be down about it or be too up about it for too long. You're not going to be in a state of mind to deal with what comes next. And what comes next on the boat is so much out of our control with the situation that we're in, that you really are putting yourself in a difficult situation if you're not moving on from each moment. What's that game that we used to have where you could draw things and then turn the dials and it would wipe it clean?
Oh my gosh. I think they were called Etch-a-Sketch. Yes.
Yeah. That's something we talk about on the boat. One of my my coaching peer friends, Mara Gleason Olson, shared that analogy with us, with our team before we left. She said, you're going to need to know how to use your Etch-a-Sketch in real time to just continue to move forward, right? And all these things are going to be happening and you're going to have an emotional response to them, but how you respond and how quickly you respond to go back to sort of a base state will determine how well the boat can perform in the next situation that arises. And that is the number one skill, I think, that allows people to be effective on the boat is to be able to just clear your mind and clear what has happened. And the example I used, with the helms person, a couple of days, for a lot of people, it takes them a couple of days to get over some mistakes that affect the performance of the boat, or the sails being ripped or whatever. And the reality is, in a racing perspective, we don't really have a couple of days to wait to respond. But I also can't force it to happen for people. So it's like, I have to respond as fast as it's happening in real time, and I have to be ready to make decisions for the team. And other people respond in a different time frame. But I do think somebody asked me, how this race changes people from what I've seen, and I think the ability to move past errors, move past fear, move past setback, and then get back in there and try again. I don't think anybody on our boat gets to do that at the frequency that we get to do it on. Nobody has a life that is full of opportunities to respond the way that this race will provide. And so I think we're all going to be better for that. And it just means that you're really looking at all the situations that are unfolding as opportunities to grow and get better and respond more quickly when things don't go as you hope. And eventually, over time, I think those errors become far and far, spread out far and far between, and we become a better crew and a faster boat.
I think they become fuel for empowerment, because you're getting quicker and quicker at returning to the midline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those opportunities to return to the midline, are kind of what I was speaking to about, what I've seen for me as the biggest shift is I was playing in a very small court before leaving port. I could get to the corners and be back at midline quite easily, because I had constructed my life and my business in that way. Now that, it's a much bigger court to cover now, and there's a whole bunch of other people running around on it.
Wow.
And so, I think that will be part of my growth from this, is getting back to midline from more extreme situations and more extreme corners of that, virtual court, and helping other people do the same, So yeah, it's interesting.
It is. Yeah. Thank you for all that. What a great conversation about motivation and keeping going. It's really helpful. Thank you for sharing your experience. I would love to take we've got probably 10 minutes or so. There's been some questions in the Facebook group, and I'd wanted to ask for an enhanced description of something that I heard about that I really want to hear more about. Sure. Okay, so I think it's Angel asks,
yeah.
How many restrooms do you have to share on the boat?
Yeah, so we have two. And the funny thing about the restrooms is that one of them is piped to the starboard side, which is the right-hand side of the boat, and the other is piped to the port side, or the left side of the boat. And why that matters is, if the boat is heeling or leaning over one direction, then that piping is downhill, and the other one is uphill. So in many conditions, we really have one effective toilet, and one which is a much higher risk experience. And so, yes. And so, they're very basic. They have no toilet seat. They are, everybody sits down to do their business. And there's a hand pump that you have to pump water into the bowl, and then there's another setting on the pump to extract what's in the bowl. through the piping and out into the sea. And that we have tanks to hold the waste, but once we're away from, I think it's a couple hundred miles from shore, we're allowed to discharge into the ocean. Otherwise, we discharge into the tanks. But yeah, it's very basic. We don't put any toilet paper down the toilets, so toilet paper ends up in a disposable bag, which we then throw into the ocean every cleaning, which is every 4 hours. So it's one of the least glamorous parts of the boat, for sure. And as Ray probably wrote about, cleaning them is challenging because oftentimes the boat is pitching around or leaned over or whatever. And you've got 20 people's, life having been spent in there to deal with. But we all take a shift every 9 days on our boat. It's your job to clean the heads usually 3 or 4 times a day. And it makes a difference. Like, one of the things I noticed on our boat is that when people have really taken those roles seriously and done them well, and when you go in to use the heads or the washrooms, and they've been well cleaned, it gives you a sense of pride that people on the boat have pride for the boat and for the condition of the boat and for each other.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. It's one of those roles that people roll their eyes about, but I think in doing it well, you actually really are contributing to the well-being of the boat.
Yeah. You were like lauded, praised in some. Was there some sort of award for you for your?
We have this little lunchtime at lunch every day. The 2 watches eat lunch together and have a little quick meeting. And one of the things in the meeting is sort of any call outs that people want to make, just for people who've really reinforced our culture and the things we've agreed to. Yes. And so I got some accolades for the cleanliness of my washrooms on my shift. So
awesome.
Who knew I had that talent?
Yeah. And the cooking was improved too. You were saying that you've figured out how to, because we talked about that a little bit last time.
We did, yeah. That used to be sort of my nemesis was cooking, and it still is probably one of the things I worry about the most. But I had some good experiences. I had a couple of really good partners who were helpful. On one of the shifts, my partner got really sick, and so I was left to fend for myself with a little bit of support from some others. So, but it was a much more positive experience, and one of my personal goals is to continue to get better at that, so that it's not something that I worry about as much as I have been so far.
Yeah, cool. And we did talk about that last time too, so it feels like that's an upward trajectory for you. Olga and Dean basically asked a very, very similar questions. Could you share the moments that you found most challenging physically and mentally? Were they expected or totally unexpected, from Olga? And Dean asks, what were the biggest challenges you had that you did not anticipate?
Yeah, I think we've talked about the mental ones quite a bit already, like the managing people and decision making on who was ready to perform in whatever situation we were going through. That has, from a mental perspective, been, I think, the most difficult part. And not really expecting it to be as much of a challenge as it's been so far. And I'm not sure why I didn't expect it to be a challenge, but maybe I didn't anticipate that people would have the amount of variation, or that people's readiness to contribute would be as flexible and inconsistent as perhaps it's been at times. And I don't say that in a negative way towards anybody. I just think that people respond differently, and when things go well or when they don't go well, and how long it takes them to get back to that midline is different for different people. and when you're trying to manage all of that, and still have to show up and perform, then that's been more challenging than I was expecting.
Anticipating.
On the
Yeah.
mental side, yeah.
Yeah.
On the physical side, yeah, I mean, life aboard the boat is a physical experience. Like there's some pictures I put up. You are, the boat is at 45 degrees. Moving around the boat is very challenging. Moving around the boat down below is very challenging. We have some very big, like tall people who are less mobile, and you have to be really careful that you don't get hurt because somebody else is, has fallen or lost their footing or what have you. And then there's different roles on the boat that require different physical, abilities. And so, I'm somebody that has been sort of from the bow to the stern, been involved in lots of the different activities on the boat. I'd say physically, the most difficult parts have been, well, it's interesting because one of the things that I've done on the boat is filled in some of the gaps on steering the boat on some of the shifts when the conditions have been really difficult. And I've done long, like 4-hour, actually 1 6-hour shift where I steered the entire time. And not because I was taking it away from anybody, but it was pretty clear to me that that's the situation we were in, and the readiness of everybody to contribute wasn't quite there in those situations. And they seem to agree and recognize that it might be best if I was willing to do that. But that's a very long physical and mental challenge to be on the helm steering the boat through the conditions for 4 to 6 hours. It's a long time. And those were exhausting physically and mentally as well. Other than that, there's times where I wish I was 5 or 6 inches taller and I could grab a few lines that were just out of reach. But generally, I've actually been pretty happy with how my body's responded. I'm healthy. Haven't had any scares in terms of falls or anything like that.
Cool.
So the goal is to continue in that way. It's really a self-preservation when you're out there, that you're always looking out to make sure you're staying safe and staying one hand on the boat, one hand to sail the boat. So it's always one hand for yourself. And I think if I keep doing that, then hopefully we come out of this unscathed. My hands are a little beaten up as they tend to get in sailing from pulling ropes. And getting wet, and that was expected coming into it. So I'm trying to take care of them now that we're in port. But yeah, I'd say yeah, physically it hasn't been so bad. I lose probably 10 or 12 pounds on each race, just because of the amount of work versus the intake that's possible.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we've also been in some places that have great cuisine, so I tend to put most of it back by the time we leave.
Awesome.
So yeah.
I was thinking about I happened to be in a motorboat in the Rideau Lakes where there was a rock that we didn't see, and like you're going and all of a sudden like it was, I mean, to be the helms person and to sort of have those unanticipated things is pretty wild. I know our time is short. I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit about the whales. And maybe this will be the same answer, or maybe it won't be, but can you take us into a moment that was on this leg that was really wonderful and marvelous and special for you?
Yeah, they could very easily be the same answer, but I'll give you separate ones.
Okay.
So the whales was I think we're about 10 days out of Uruguay, and in the first of two sort of major wind hole situations where we had run out of wind. And this night, the wind was completely flat, and a fog had dropped in as well. So we were floating along, but with barely any wind in the sails, and could not see it, past the end of the boat. And it was very quiet. And we were sitting, and I was up on the bow of the boat working on trying to get the sails to fly. And I was with another guy, Justin, who's from Australia, and we were up there. We weren't talking to each other. We were just doing our tasks. And all of a sudden, you could hear these spouts of whales going off all around us, like in all kinds of different directions. And we went back aft to talk to the rest of the crew, and they were having the same experience. And I think we were surrounded by a whole pod of whales who must have been pretty significant, because they were making a very, very loud spouting sound. And it just felt like we were being communicated to in some weird way. They were curious about what we were doing. Yeah. It was wild. And I think for almost everybody on the boat has mentioned that night as one of their highlight moments. So that was really special. I'd say the highlight moments for me, there's kind of two of them. A couple days before the finish, we were sitting in 10th place, and we had just come up to start our watch, and somebody pointed to a little speck on the horizon that looked like could be a white sail, but it wasn't showing up on our radar system as one of our competitors, so we weren't really sure what it was. And after a little while on our shift, I figured it was a sailboat, and we kind of deducted that it might be one of our competitors that was just ahead of us, and for whatever reason their system was not showing on our radar. And so I said, well, I think we should go. I think we have an opportunity to try to catch them, even though we only had a couple of days left. It looked like they were about 10 to 12 miles, is typically as far as you can see out in the ocean. So we kind of had a general sense of how far away they might be. So I started steering and came up with a plan to sort of take a more direct route to Cape Town than what the other boat was taking, and try to cut some of the distance off by sort of taking a more narrow angle to the wind than what the other boat was taking. And Mike came up, our skipper, and I explained what I was thinking, and he was, absolutely supportive of giving it a try. And so for the next 3 or 4 hours, we just noticed that we were getting closer and closer to them as they were sort of going a little more of a diagonal course than we were. And soon enough, they were right in front of us. And I think they had probably let their guard down in terms of the racing element a little bit, and didn't seem, once we got close, they started to try a lot harder. Let's say it that way. So then it became a question of, all right, it's one thing to catch up, but it's another thing to pass somebody. And so we ended up doing a series of 4 maneuvers. The first 2 were really designed to put them under pressure so that we forced them to react to something that we would do. So when you're sailing downwind, it's called jibing, when you switch from one side to the other. So we jibed once right in front of them and forced them to jibe. And then we jibed right back within 10 minutes, forced them to jibe again. And then we did that 2 more times. And during that phase, on one of the jibes, they had an issue and ended up wrapping their spinnaker around the forestay of their boat. And were forced to have to take the sail down and recoup and then put a new sail up. And so, being in that sort of one-on-one environment, like literally being able to see the people you're racing and hear the activity aboard, and be aggressive and make decisions to try to pass, that was really special, because we had sort of found ourselves in a position where the boat behind us was way behind us when we were in 10th. And we weren't really sure we were within reach of anybody to get any higher. And just the idea of being 9th seemed so much better than the idea of being 10th, where it's really irrelevant. But psychologically, it was not irrelevant to have done that. And so that was really special.
And I want to say this too, because as a viewer, it was a real thrill to wake up one morning and see that you were not in 10th, you were in 9th. It was like, yeah. Oh, I just totally just dropped an F-bomb. I'm sorry.
Sorry. That's probably was used on the boat as well. Yeah. And if you look at the race viewer, you can see those maneuvers and how a couple of those maneuvers led to the other boat slowing down and us zooming past them.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
That was awesome. And then thank you. And then the other one was definitely we have every lunch hour on the boat. One of the other things we do is we share a story. So every one person from the boat shares a story, and it could be all kinds of things. Some people have sang songs. Some people have told sort of guess whether this is true or a fiction kind of stories, and other people have told very personal stories. And I had told a story on the way over about why this leg was really important to me. And as we started our conversation today, I kind of told that story. And so we were about, 30 miles out of Cape Town, and Mike, and we were coming on shift, and I was on the helm, and Mike said, I'd like you to take us across the finish line. And so that was, I could tell it's still important to me. That was really special. And it was really cool to have him acknowledge, and he knew, being as competitive as I am, he knew that, the result that we got wasn't probably what I had envisioned for this race. But being able to do that and to see Table Mountain, even though it was, early in the morning, and, that we saw the silhouette of Table Mountain and the lights of Cape Town coming within view was really, really special. And to sail right across the finish line, definitely will be a highlight of the race. Even though we were in 9th place, it wouldn't have mattered. The chance to get to do that was pretty cool.
Oh wow, that's epic. Something that's coming up to this is, I think you'd said in the first one of our conversations that this is a race where there's an average in terms of by the end of whoever wins, there's these sort of opportunities all along to kind of perform and win different things. And when I just happened to look, I think as we were getting ready for this conversation, and I noticed that you're in 4th place overall.
Yeah. We didn't do too much damage to our overall placing as a result of this. And we know that we're one of the better boats. We know that the culture on our team is we believe is the best culture of all the boats. And we just need to execute a little better and get a little bit of fortune going our way. And I think, we can consistently perform well, that we'll be in the top 3 or 4 boats all the way around the world. And whatever that actually leads to doesn't really matter. I think just we'd like to be consistently competitive and to know that we have a good fighting chance all the time. And again, going from 10th to 9th, to me, what that was all about is just proving that, yes, we are a better crew, and we're better than what our result is showing right now. And we have the ability to demonstrate that.
Yeah, and you can let that go.
Exactly. And I'm very confident, we'll demonstrate that in the races to come. And I think we still have, we've only done 2 legs out of 8. And I think there's 14 races altogether in Clipper, because some of the legs have multiple races within them. So we're still early days. And
I think a really important question that everybody wants to know is, are you still alive and Assassin? Is the game still progressing?
I ended up in a situation where the person I was to kill was also trying to kill me.
Yep.
And so we kind of had to just withdraw from from the game because
Oh, you weren't handed gravy on the,
no, because we
Damn.
would have both yeah, we would have, if one of us had succeeded, then the other then we would have had to basically commit suicide within the game as well. So
mm.
no, somebody else. Well, we actually ended up sort of in a situation where I think had to run sort of a tiebreaker
Oh, wow.
at the end. Yeah, where
Because you're all so
two
good.
two people were given 3 scenarios that had to be completed, the same 3 scenarios. And whoever could get 2 of them done first, I think that's the way it was, won the game.
Won the game.
So anyway,
Cool.
yeah, we have a lot of fun on the boat. You know, we
Yeah.
did eventually have Halloween. We had it, I think, a day or two late because of the weather. And we have Sunday fun days when we do like crock tossing into a bucket and for points and all kinds of crazy games. And you know, it's, again, other boats hear about this stuff because people write about it in our blog, and it's not something that happens on all the boats. And a lot of the people really admire the fact that our crew puts the effort in to do those things and seemingly has a good time even while they're racing.
You're like a family. I mean, why not have fun with your family?
You know, it's interesting when we're in port. We hang out together, we eat together. There's people who, you know, are sharing apartments together. And a lot of the other boats, you see everybody kind of disband and do their own stuff. Our boat is much more a collective, and it's a really cool component of what we've created.
And where are you headed next?
We are headed to the west coast of Australia. And so the actual port city is Fremantle, which is, I think, within 20-30 minutes south of Perth on the west coast of Australia. So it's a place I've been before. Back in my swimming coaching days, we were there for the World Swimming Championships one year, and beautiful. It'll be summer, so it'll be hot and dry on the west coast.
Wow.
And but getting there from here in South Africa is one of the more treacherous parts of the world in terms of the oceans. And so definitely going into it with a high level of respect for the conditions we could face, and got to mentally prepare for that for sure.
How does one mentally prepare for that?
Well, I think understanding what's possible, and then going back to some of the things we've talked about, right? Of being able to just stay in the present moment during those shifts, and knowing the boat is capable of handling the conditions that could be there, and just, you know, being safe and doing things the way we've been trained to do them, and supporting your crewmates. Yeah, I mean, this part of the Southern Ocean, we're down. I think we'll end up about 600 miles south of South Africa before we turn east to go towards Australia. And so it's going to be cold. Most of the weather comes from Antarctica once you're down there, and there's no land getting in the way of the wind and the waves for thousands of miles. So you end up with 30 and 40 foot waves, generally going in the direction you're trying to go, which is a good thing. But a 30 or 40 foot wave is quite a stunning thing to see. I think we've seen 20-foot waves so far in the race, and it's a wall of water that reaches as high as the mast of the boat, you know, when you're seeing it, or it seems like it is. But fortunately the boat's designed, you know, and the wave kind of just lifts the boat up, goes underneath it, and then the boat kind of does a little acceleration down the backside of the wave, and everything's fine. So there's danger for sure if there's a lot of wind, and, you know, you have to keep the boat going in the direction of the waves. You don't want the waves hitting you from the side and potentially rolling the boat in some way. But it has the potential to be quite intense, and for those storms to carry a lot of cold wind, and the water temperature is only 10 degrees Celsius down in that part of the ocean. So the spray and everything else is creating some interesting conditions. So being prepared for that, and being prepared clothing wise and all that is a big part of this leg. So I think everybody's making sure their kit is all prepared, and they have the right number of layers. They have gloves, they have toques, they have everything to stay warm and as dry as possible.
This is really inspiring. I just want to say that. Like, I want to celebrate you. I want to celebrate the culture that you're helping create. It's really inspiring. We started off with like keeping going, right? And taking those small steps, and like to sort of, I don't know. It's just really inspiring. Thank you for sharing about it all too. Like,
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to really understand how how me doing this and sharing what my experience is affects people, but it has been quite cool to see the variety of ways people have expressed that back, and the fact that I've had people come out to different places around the world to say hello and to wish me well. Yeah, and I think doing this, the podcast, which I really appreciate, Kay, and writing about the leg, it's therapeutic for me as well, because it helps me just sort of process what's happening in a different way.
Yeah.
And so, the race was created because, Robin Knox Johnson, who's the founder of the race, believed people were capable of taking on bigger adventures than they were. And he wanted to create a way for them to do that. And so if I can just share what I'm going through, and lots of the other crew are also sharing their experiences, then it gives people a chance to say, well, maybe I could do something, whether it be sailing or anything. And as we've talked about today, I think anytime we broaden that circle or the size of the tennis court that we're playing in, it gives us a chance to learn a lot about ourselves, and to learn how to be capable of handling much more than we could have possibly imagined. And if that's the outcome of what I'm doing, that would be amazing.
Because there is so much heart in it, and so much connectedness, human connectedness, the culture that you create on the boat, and the ways that you're growing yourself and being able to see the challenges and sit with them. And I mean, it's epic.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you. And thanks for doing this again. It's always look forward to these conversations, and to see what direction your curiosity and some of the people who are following along will go.
Yeah.
It's great. And it's a nice way for me to share with the broader audience what we're going through.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it's helpful for all of that, and for you. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye until Fremantle?
Well, no, just I think for those that hear this, if they're not already part of the Facebook group, I'd invite people to join the Facebook group and see some of the posts. I know yourself and Monique and others, are sharing in there about what you're seeing as we're sailing, which I don't get to see any of that until I get to port. But to join along, and if you'd like to find a way to support what I'm up to, that would be certainly appreciated as well. Other than that, we'll see you in Australia.
We'll see you in Australia. And the links both to join the Facebook group, the Climb Aboard My Adventure Facebook group, and to your GoFundMe, if people are inspired and would like to support your family as you're kind of taking this sabbatical from your beloved coaching business, your coaching practice. That's very, very welcome. You're signing off from Cape Town, and we'll see you in Australia. Safe. Thank you for listening. Where in the World is Andrew Moss is produced by me, Kay Locke Cope. If, like me, you're inspired by Andrew's journey, you can follow along in his Facebook group, Climb Aboard Andrew's Adventure. The link is in the show notes. Also, this is the longest time that Andrew has been away from his family and his work. He truly has no idea what lies on the other side of this adventure. You can contribute to Andrew's adventure costs and help soften the blow of a year away from his beloved coaching practice by donating to his GoFundMe at the link in the show notes. And Andrew asks that you consider making a donation to his boat's UNICEF fundraiser, also at the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening and for supporting Andrew if you can. Join us next time when once again we answer the question, where in the world is Andrew Moss?